Hi everyone, welcome back to my class. So students, in the previous class, you all have learnt about the brain, parts of the brain and the functions of the parts as well. In today's session, let us understand the next concept, which is very interesting concept from the lesson, control and the coordination. Before beginning the concept, let me give you few examples to understand the concept. Okay, there are few pens in my hand. Okay, suppose one of the pen from my hand, if it unfortunately falls down. Now I'm doing it purposefully. Suppose if it falls unfortunately, see if I drop it unfortunately, what exactly it did now? Within fractions of seconds, my direction of eyesight changed from the forward view to the downward view. Correct? Because I was trying to catch hold of that. Because I could sense it. Without thinking, I could sense it that the pen is just dropping down from my hand, and for that particular reaction, I have reacted. Correct? Okay, another example. When you are in dangerous situation, for example, if somebody is trying to hit you, okay, that is a dangerous situation. What exactly you do? You just move away from that particular region, right? Or you just go back from that place where you're going to get hurt. Correct? And this also you have done in fractions of seconds. How could this happen? And when you come in contact with some hot substances without knowing you just go away from that particular region. You just move your body out of it. Correct? How you could do all these things without thinking? Did you think? You just responded for the all dangerous situation within fractions of seconds. Correct? How could this happen? Yes, of course. We are going to understand about this concept in this session, that how could this happen and what made this to happen. Okay? So in this session, we are going to understand about the concept reflex action. We're going to understand about the reflex action. Fine. So then, how can we define a reflex action? So reflex action is something we are going to respond to the stimulus. That is the sudden response to stimulus. Reflex action is the sudden response to stimulus. Because in all these situations, we have responded very, very fastly within fractions of seconds. It was all a sudden response to the stimulus. Oh, okay. So hence we can define a reflex action as sudden response to stimulus. I just write here, it's a sudden response to stimulus. It's a sudden response to stimulus. Reflex action is a sudden response to stimulus. And one more thing you all have to understand is, this reflex action is an involuntary action. Involuntary because without your involvement, that means you know that there are few involuntary actions which are happening inside your body without your involvement. For example, the heartbeat, the blood pressure, correct, and some of the functions of the organ which taken place inside the body. All these are happening without your involvement. We can consider reflex action is also an involuntary action because you are performing, you are making some kind of activity without knowing. You are not making yourself to think. Without thinking, you are responding immediately. Hence, we can consider that reflex action is also involuntary action. Okay. So now, here I have drawn the diagram of, this is the diagram of the spinal cord. Okay. So now let us understand how this reflex action takes place when we are in contact with the dangerous situation. Okay. So now, this is the spinal cord. This is a small section of the spinal cord where I have just drawn the nerves out of the spinal cord. Okay, nerves means you know that it is a neuron. So now, when our body or when our hand or any part of a body, when it come in contact with a dangerous situation, for example, I have written a fire here. When we come in contact with fire unknowingly, what will you do? That is what exactly we are going to understand now. So now, when your body come in contact with such dangerous situation, example, when your hand come in contact with the fire, what will you do? See, first of all, the temperature of this part increases. As the temperature increases, what happens? The nerves which are present inside, it will send the message. It will send a message to this region. What is this region? This is the spinal cord. The nerves, it sends a message to this region. First of all, what happens, so the message reaches to the nerves. This message will convert into the electrical impulses as an electrical signals. The message converts into electrical signals because it will be very faster. Okay, so it converts into electrical impulses or electrical signals, we can call it as. So this message will travel to this region. Which region? The spinal cord. Okay, and later it may also travel. Take an example. Here is our brain. I just draw roughly the brain. Suppose if the message travel to brain, what does the brain do? The brain, it receives the message, right? And then it thinks, and then it processes, and then it gives the information what you have to do. Because brain is the part where thinking is involved. Correct. So now, let us think. If the message, electrical impulses which has been traveled from this region to the spinal cord, if it is been sent to the brain, and if we have to wait for the brain to receive the information, and the information which is received, if it travel back through this region, and then it is being reaching to the hand where you are in contact with the dangerous situation, it would have taken some time because the signal now it has been sent to the brain. If we wait for the brain to process the information and then to react for this particular situation, what might be happened? Do you have an idea what might be happened? Yes, of course, your hand would have been burnt because you're waiting for your brain to give the information and then to respond. But now, this has not happened in this situation. This will not happen because you will not wait for your brain to think and then to process and then to receive the information and then to react. Instead, what will you do? You will do the action within fractions of seconds. Then how could it possible? How could it be possible? So I'll tell you now. See, as you come in contact with the dangerous situation, as I told you what happened, the receptors are found in the sensory organs. I told you in the previous classes, right? So this receptors, it sends the messages, and then what happened? It will, as I told you, it will convert into electrical impulses. Okay, and this electrical impulses, it will travel to the spinal cord, and then it will not send the electrical impulses to the brain. The electrical impulses which travel to the spinal cord, it will not send to the brain. Instead, it will send the electrical impulse to another neuron. These all electrical impulses are being traveled to the neuron. Correct? So instead of sending to the brain, it will send to another neuron. Immediately the response will be sent as an electrical impulses to this region, and you will be respond for that dangerous situation in fractions of seconds. That is what exactly happens, because if the information is sent to the brain, you will not wait for the brain to give the information and then to react. Instead, you will react immediately for that particular dangerous situation, and that happened without sending the information or electrical impulses to the brain. See, whatever the information it is being received by the sensory tip, it will travel to the spinal cord. Okay, through the neuron, it will travel to the spinal cord and it will send to another neuron, and then what happened? It immediately send a message as through an electrical impulse, and then you could react to that particular situation immediately. That is what exactly happens. Clear? So, in reflex action, the messages which are being received by the sensory tips will not be sent to the brain. You will not wait for your brain to receive the information and then to react. Instead, you will react to that particular or dangerous situation immediately. Clear? I hope you all have understood now how you are going to react to any kind of dangerous situation. Okay. Now, I will teach you which are the neurons which involve in this process of reflex action. Okay. So, let us understand the neurons which involve in this reflex action. The first, see, when your sensory tips, when it could recognize the message at the tips, what happens? It sends the message through a neuron. It sends the message to the neuron. So that neuron we call it as sensory neuron. We call it as sensory neuron. Sensory neuron, it will receive the messages. It will sense the messages and it will send to the spinal cord. Okay, as I told you that the message which is being received here, okay, through the neuron, it will not transfer to the brain. Instead, there is a neuron which is present here. So, it will help to perform the activity for the dangerous situation. And that neuron, we call it as the relay neuron. We call it as the relay neuron. Relay neuron is just associating between the sensory neuron and another neuron which is called as the motor neuron. Motor neuron. Correct? So what exactly what happened here? See, when you come in contact with the dangerous situation, what happened? The messages is sent through the sensory neuron. Sensory neurons carries the messages to the spinal cord and then it reaches to the relay neuron. The relay neuron immediately sends the electrical impulses through the motor neuron. And what happens to this hand? This hand will be drawn away from this particular situation. You just remove the hand away from that particular dangerous situation. And the whole process where the sensory neuron, relay neuron and motor neuron involved, this whole process is called as reflex arc. It is called as the reflex arc. It's right here. It is called as the reflex arc. So what do the reflex arc involve? Reflex arc involves the sensory neuron, relay neuron and the motor neuron. Don't confuse. They will ask you what is the difference between reflex action and reflex arc. Reflex arc is the pathway. Reflex arc is the pathway, whereas reflex action is the sudden response to stimulus. Reflex action is the sudden response to stimulus. Clear? So what exactly happened here? So you could respond to the dangerous situations immediately without sending the impulses or the messages to the brain. Because your brain is the center where it involves thinking. You will not wait for your brain to think and then to process the information to react to the dangerous situation. Instead, what will you do? You will react it very faster. How could it happen? It could happen because of the presence of sensory neuron, relay neuron and the motor neuron. Where it is present in the reflex arc. Okay? Because of the reflex arc, you could perform the reflex action. You could perform the reflex action. Okay. So the sensory neuron carries the messages as an electrical impulses and reaches to the relay neuron which is present in the spinal cord. And the relay neuron, it immediately transfers the electrical impulses to the what? Motor neuron. So motor, why we call it as motor neuron? Because it is making your hand to move. It is making your hand to move means motion. Hence we call it as motor neuron. I hope you all could understand the whole system of reflex action or the reflex arc which we have studied in this session. Okay, in the next session I will teach you about the hormones. Okay, because hormones are very essential. We are going to study about both the plant hormones as well as the animal hormones. Later we will study about the tropisms. Okay, if you have any doubt regarding this, you can write it in the comment section. I will definitely reply for your doubts. Okay, that's all for this session. I'm signing off. Thank you.